Hi, everybody. My name's Ben. I'm an Agile coach and a Scrum Master at Vodafone UK. I'm not talking specifically today about Agile in lockdown as such, but I think there's a lot of values that can transfer across. I'm actually talking about quite a contentious issue, which is T-shaping. T-shaping, cross-skilling, whatever you want to call it. It's basically, as an individual, are you fixed on one skill set, or do you have a broad skill set so that in your squad you can attack lots of different user stories that come into the team? I'm going to share with you a story about an experiment that we ran with some of the guys at Vodafone UK. Let's see if I can go to the next slide. There we go. This is a real team. And I'm proving it's a real team because I've got all their pictures, and there's me at the top of the back. We were go-karting. I actually won, which was a miracle because I'm quite a big guy. So my power to weight ratio isn't great on a kart. But this is a team I've been with for a couple of years. And I look at Agile from a slightly different lens because this is a commercial digital marketing team. So it's not a pure development team, which you often find using Agile. These guys are a mixture of commercial managers, big data scientists, digital analytics, comms, design, front-end development, you name it. It's a really mixed bunch. And we've seen Agile work really well. But this team specifically are responsible for retention digital marketing campaigns. So Cerberus, if any of you are familiar, is the three-headed dog that guards the gates of Hades. So read into that what you want, but that's the name that they chose to give themselves when we formed a few years ago. This team, in a couple of retrospectives, were bringing out that they wanted to T-shape more, because with those very specific skill sets, you would not have a lot of crossover naturally between like a big data scientist and a graphic designer, or a commercial manager and a copywriter. So although we were a cross-functional collaborative team, sometimes there did feel like handovers within the team. And actually, on quite a few occasions, the guy says, we quite like to T-shape, we quite like to cross-skill. But in reality, this team are really busy. There's a lot of pressure. Almost anything that we do as a business, there is some kind of aspect on our customer base, or we have to send out communications. So it's high pressure. So T-shaping and cross-skilling normally got pushed to the back of the priority list. It didn't make it very far up the backlog a lot of the time. So we were having a retrospective, and the guys got really fed up, and they just said, we really want to T-shape. So we came up with an idea to run an experiment. And I put a bit of a tweak on this experiment because I was fed up of hearing them say again, we want to T-shape, we want to T-shape, we want to T-shape, and then it getting deprioritized. So I came up with an experiment whereby we would spend a couple of days doing a swarm around a real epic. So it was a real piece of work. And there was going to be a rule that you could not work on your own job, or your own discipline, as we call it. So if you're a big data scientist, you can't do big data science. You've got to do something else. If you're a graphic designer, you can't do graphic design. You get the picture. This was a tangible, real epic that we broke down into user stories. And using our kind of historical velocity, we were able to say fairly confidently that this was an achievable epic in a few days. We should be able to get a tangible product increment ready. It blew the guys' minds a little bit that they weren't going to be working on their own jobs. And that was quite difficult to get their heads around. But it was almost like an excited moment where they were looking at me and the product owner like, oh, are we really allowed to do this? And we were like, yes, we can do it. So we created a backlog, and we got stuck in. This is what most of the swarm actually, or the mini sprint, whatever you want to call it, this is what most of the swarm looked like. It was groups of 2s and 3s gathering around one laptop. And in this instance, for example, here at the front, we've got George and Marvin. And George is a digital analytics manager, and Marvin is a campaign operations manager. So very different job roles. And actually, George was learning how to do campaign operations, like sending out all the emails to our customer base. And Marvin was learning about how we do digital analytics, how we analyze customers going through the funnel, and so on. And that happened in pairs and threes throughout the swarm. Now, I've got to admit, I wasn't hugely optimistic about getting everything done. I thought it was a stretch. I thought it was going to be really tough. But actually, what we started to see over those couple of days is the backlog moving pretty quickly across the board and into done. And we had some great moments where we were actually having 2 to 3 stand-ups in a day, where we'd have a stand-up in the morning, we'd have a quick stand-up after lunch just to check in and see if the pairs needed to switch, who was going to attack which story next. We'd do a stand-up at the end of the day just to check in again around the board. It was really awesome to see. It was very collaborative. But we got to the end of the swarm, and the team had actually managed to do pretty much all of what was in the backlog. So this was a real campaign that we needed to send out, and it actually got delivered. We really did send out this campaign. So the team felt really awesome. We did a fantastic retrospective that one of the team members actually, she T-shaped with me as a Scrum Master, and she delivered a retrospective. So that's Adina, you can see her there, stood with her arms folded, and she delivered a fantastic retrospective. And the team were really great at understanding that they developed a load of empathy that they'd never had before. You know, the struggles that they each faced in their roles, and actually being able to share in that. Oh, I didn't realize this system was so clunky to use, or I didn't realize you had that pressure from that stakeholder, or whatever else it was. So we had a really brilliant reflective session, and it really did switch the mood in the squad in terms of having more empathy and understanding, as well as obviously learning a few new skills. So I was quite proud, but there was something that just didn't add up, because I, as a Scrum Master, I'm looking at things like velocity, love them or hate them. We use story points. They've worked really well for us. I'm sure I get a load of abuse about story points because there's a whole no estimation movement going on, but story points work for us, and they've been good. So we know our velocity now. We took in 158 story points in this little mini sprint. We took a couple of stories out pretty much straight away because we realized that we couldn't actually do them. So the 89% represents the amount of work that we did versus what we planned. Now, 89% by our standards was great. We normally aim for 80% or above, and I think by most people's standards, it's a fantastic result. So there was only a couple of things that didn't quite make it over the line, but the MVP was there, the epic was delivered, and we were really happy. Now, I started adding up and calculating what that meant for average story points delivered per day. Now, in a normal sprint, I've got 2 years of data that shows that in an average day, this squad will deliver about 37 story points. That's 37 story points will move into done in an average sprint day. Now, this same squad in the T-shaping days, so in these swarm days, delivered on average 61 points in a day. And I calculated and I thought I'd made a mistake, so I calculated again. But it was accurate. They'd actually delivered 65% more in a day on average during this T-shaping sprint than they had in a normal sprint. And I'll be honest, I was really confused, and it kind of worried me because effectively I was thinking these guys are 65% more productive when they're not even doing their own jobs. And that really sent me into a bit of a panic. Like, we are literally proving here that these guys are going to be more effective doing something that they've never been trained to do. Because these guys, I was anticipating it would be half, because you're either going to spend your time learning a new skill or teaching someone else a skill. So in my mind, I just thought it's going to be roughly half as effective, but no, 65% more productive when not doing their own jobs. So we put this back to the team at the end of the retrospective. And actually, what came out was that the multitasking that this team do in a normal sprint is a real detriment. Now, we're normally juggling a few different epics. There's a few different demands. It could be a new device launch and we need to send marketing out for it. It could be a regulatory change and we need to send out communications. It could be ongoing optimization of campaigns that we send to customers. So there's normally a few different things going on, which mean the squads are often juggling a few different epics. And actually what this mini sprint or this swarm enabled the guys to do was focus on one thing at a time. It was one epic. Everyone in the room, regardless of whether they were developing the content, the design for the email, or whether they were working on the big data models to figure out who we were going to send this campaign to, they were all working on the same thing. So they could shout across the room at each other, ask questions, and everyone was focused. And I don't think I need to explain to a virtual room full of Scrum Masters and Agile enthusiasts, the benefits of focusing and doing one thing at a time. So this was a huge learning. Not only was there the empathy, the collaboration, the T-shaping, very practically, but there was also this huge revelation for the squad that we need to get more focus. And actually, it shifted the way that the team looked at the backlog. Can we get it down to more of a focused backlog? Can we make sure we limit what's in a sprint to 1 or 2 different epics at tops? Like, how can we do that? This experiment really proved the point and got them thinking differently. So you might be thinking, what can I do? Because not everyone gets approval to take 2 or 3 days out with a team and try some wacky experiment. But the first thing that I would say is experiment. And it's easier said than done, but be brave and be bold. Wherever you can, take an opportunity to try something new. We are in a day and age where if we don't try new things, we're just going to fall by the wayside and the competition is going to eat us up. So we need to be bold with our experiments as Scrum Masters, as Agile coaches, as Agile delivery managers. We need to get bold with experiments. I can't recommend it enough. Secondly, focus. Oh, I've nudged the next two along. Okay, you're all going to be looking at the girl doing her stretches now. But secondly is focus. If you want to win 5 tugs of war with your team, and you divide up and you put one person on each tug of war, you're never going to win. You need to do one at a time. And it's really the same when we do sprint work. You need to focus on one thing at a time, get it done, get everyone around it. It's far more efficient. And we've seen that in our team. And thirdly is time. It takes a long time to get comfortable running experiments. It takes a long time to T-shape. It takes a long time to build that psychological safety as a team. So don't panic thinking that you've got to do this all in a day, and don't panic thinking just because you run one experiment or one T-shaping session that the team haven't quite bought in yet. Be patient, invest in that team, take them on a journey, practice. I'm sure this girl probably couldn't do that after a couple of hours. I'm sure it's taken her years, and I'm going to move along just because it's probably freaking some people out. Finally, I'm just going to do a bit of a plug, really. I started a website with a few guys that I actually worked with at Vodafone. A couple of them were on this call. So big up Robin, Kat, Amy. We were working together at Vodafone. We saw Agile work really well, and we decided, let's make a website and let's put some great content out there to share the good stuff that we've seen with other people. So if you grab your phone out and you head to the camera, and if you point the camera at that QR code, it will take you to our LinkedIn page. We'd love it if you followed us. We'd love it if you engage with some of our content and let us know your thoughts. On the website, there is a much more detailed blog about the extreme T-shaping experiment. It's got some of the data, it's got some of the ups and downs, and you can read more about the extreme T-shaping experiment there. Love it if you guys get involved. Love it if you comment on our content and let us know your thoughts. I think there's a lot of angst sometimes in the Agile community, and people like to get particular about terminology and the Agile manifesto. And actually what we love is just seeing a difference in the lives of teams and people, because Agile puts people first. And that's fantastic when you've got a team that love their culture, when you've got a team that reflect and they respect each other and their psychological safety. It just makes work incredible. Like kind of Abdul was saying earlier, when you've got that culture of looking out for one another, it just makes all the difference. And so we really believe in that. So we try and share content that encourages that as well. So I'd love to see loads of you guys pop up on my phone later following Agile Avengers on LinkedIn. We post blogs for Scrum Masters, product owners, teams, organizations. We try and share our learnings. There's a few of us that contribute to the site from in Vodafone and outside of Vodafone. And what I find really helpful actually is we have a section for retrospective ideas. So when I was first a Scrum Master, I was always scouring the internet for new retrospective ideas. And actually what we try to build is a bit of an archive or a library of retrospective ideas that you guys can try with your teams. There's a few in there that are particularly good for remote working. So they've come out of the remote working phase we've been through. So again, go through those, use some of them. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback on whether they worked or not and how they went down with your team. And then finally, I would love to chat with you guys. I'd love to connect. I think it's great when people share stuff, share experiments, share stories, share successes, failures, learning. So again, if you've got your phone out, scan the QR code. It will just take you through to my LinkedIn. Hit connect. I'd love to connect with you guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Again, I'd love to see my phone popping off with connection requests, because I think it's really good as an Agile community we share what's going on. So thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it wasn't fully Agile and lockdown focused, but I hope that it's been interesting, and I hope that my selective use of GIFs has given you a bit of a smile for a Thursday evening. John, should we do a couple of questions?
Sure, and I'd just like to say I've checked out the Agile Avengers as well, looked at some content, really good, and it's really useful for people who are just entering the Agile world as well. So yeah, really recommend it. So yeah, I think it'd be good to start from the panelists. Have any of you guys got a question or questions you'd like to ask Ben?
Yeah, it's me again. Pop it open. So yeah, I'm really curious actually, like obviously seeing how this worked out, because obviously the cliche of T-shaped people is you need lots of different people and you fill up your different bars of your tea and stuff like that. But I've always seen that as being like you hire different types of people into your team, and you kind of have really diverse hiring and make sure that you cover all the bases, and you don't just have like a load of people that do the same thing. So I guess it's more like how you came to the decision to say, actually, well, what we're really going to do is we're going to ask people to effectively step out of their comfort zone, which obviously isn't for everyone, right? So like whether you got any resistance but also how you kind of came to that decision, rather than trying to maybe make a squad of really mixed people.
So I think the thing with T-shaping is that in theory it sounds lovely, but in practice it's probably never going to happen, because there's no way that someone can go to university and get a master's in big data science and then come out and be expected to T-shape with a graphic designer who's just been to university and studied design. And when we're building digital products or we're building development products, often you need those mix of skills. And if we're going to apply Agile to a bunch of different companies' environments, you're going to have those different skills. So I think for us, it was less about can we do T-shaping in its purest fashion, but more, can we get a bit more of an understanding and a bit more empathy, so that when we're building a product or we're looking at a new campaign, even though you've got two very different skill sets, when we're sat in those planning sessions, the big data scientist can have some empathy with the designer when it comes to scoping out what the campaign is going to look like. And actually there's more of a fluid conversation the whole way through, rather than I'm only going to pay attention when it's the design part, or I'm only going to pay attention when it's the commercial aspect of this build. So that was kind of how we viewed it. We've recognized we're never going to hire completely T-shaped individuals, but it was about the empathy, the collaboration. And I think we've been looking and trying to develop the right attitudes in our teams, that if you want to come in and just sit in a corner and do your own thing, you're probably not going to fit here, because we want people who are collaborative. We want people who are up for learning new things. So that's kind of been our approach. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I'll probably just not question, but supporting statement to that is, it's when, did you find that people were just genuinely interested in a new area, right? We've seen that too. And if they're interested, they want to learn and they want to take on micro tasks, which means that if someone wants to go on holiday or someone gets sick during COVID, for example, you've got that stuff. Is that what were the kind of, I'd like to almost know the wow moments when they started, you had those two guys sitting at the front of the table. Do you have any quotes or any eureka moments you could share as well?
I think the wow moments, I'm just going to go back to this slide, because I think this probably shows it here. So basically the retrospective we divided up a big piece of poster chart into 4, got the guys to do self-portraits for a bit of a laugh, just to change things up. And each section was something different. So it was learn, change, and I think it was surprised and recommend. So everyone moved around and they added in some comments to each other's posters. What did I learn about your role? What would I change about your role? What surprised me about your role? What would I recommend? And so there was just so many eureka moments of like, I never realized that system was so difficult and that took so long to do. I wouldn't put so much pressure on you if I'd have known that thing crashes every half an hour. Is there any way I can help you? Is there anything I can do to make your life easier along that process? That for me, I think, and for the team, was probably the biggest thing. It was the empathy. And since then, it's just been so much less tension and such more a collaborative way of working. So I think that was it.
Honestly, that's worth its weight in gold when you've got a the external climate being like it is, right? And I think it's for all of us something. If you could add that as or you've got an experiment on your website, I think we all want to try that a little bit. Or hopefully, most of us are like, let's try this so people can take a page out of Dale Carnegie's book and say, right, how do other people actually feel, and what are they going through, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
We've just got a few questions from the audience. So Ali asks, do you think T-shaping would work remotely too?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, might be trickier because we're already staring at screens a lot, and to stare at a screen for longer to learn someone else's role is going to be tricky. But absolutely, I think you can still encourage people to collaborate more. In a similar way, what we've ended up with is two people sat around one laptop, one person's teaching, the other person's learning. That doesn't feel very efficient, because you think, well, if you just did your job and I did mine, then we probably get more done. But actually, you have to put an investment in to get a long-term benefit. And that's going to be the same whether we're remote or not. So if we're remote and two people want a T-shape, they're going to have to block some time out where one person is teaching and the other person's learning. And that's going to be tough either way. So I definitely still think you can do it. In terms of facilitating an activity or a session like that, you're going to have to get a bit more creative, use a tool like Mural, which Abdur was demonstrating earlier. But you can definitely still do it. It just requires that bravery for the initial investment in some time to get a longer term benefit.
Cool. And very last question from Dina. She asked, any idea how we can try T-shaping for dev teams where you have B, FE, and test engineers?
Oh, Dina, that's a tough one. I've not actually worked with pure dev teams. I've been working with business teams, commercial teams. So I probably wouldn't be best placed to answer that question, actually. I don't know if Jason or Abdul has got any thoughts.
I think from my perspective, and I actually put it in the chat as well, and it's obviously really common for there to be people that have specialisms in certain areas because, of course, you know, they've learned a certain stack, and they've really specialized in that stack, and that's really beneficial because it means that people can do really cool work in those areas. But I guess where I see it's maybe just a second level of T or some other letter or something like that. But like the fact that you want to avoid handoffs in any kind of sort of agile development, because any handoff is going to cause some kind of delay effectively because you're waiting for someone else to take a thing on. So I think the thing that I would really advocate myself is that front-end developers learn some back-end development. They don't have to be like all of a sudden like the best data engineer in the world or something like that, but that they have some kind of knowledge that they can use to tie the front end to the back end and vice versa. Because from my perspective, the fewer handoffs you can have in your development process, the quicker that process is going to be, because you don't have the kind of the overload of having to keep passing stuff backwards and forwards and waiting for people to be available. You just fix it yourself. And it's tough because people don't always have that mindset, or they don't have the skills in those areas, or maybe you're using a library or a platform or a language that's just different, but it just feels really, it's almost like a sub T of the big T. I mean, I still think that people should have business sense and UX sense and customer sense, all that other sense, but just having that kind of micro sense of, well, different types of the same bit of the T, so different types of development is really useful.
Yeah, just want to build on that really quickly. We just get our devs to shadow each other on core tasks. And what we tend to do is we give them a task, just like Ben was doing as well. It's usually when you release a product. So sometimes when you have a vendor that will have a specific skill set, and we have an internal team that doesn't have it, a lot of us call it knowledge transfer, but we specifically give tasks in order to create the knowledge transfer through practical experience. And also we try to, I think we're stepping a bit away from terminology like front end, back end. We like this, I use this term personally called unicorn individuals, where you have a broad-based understanding of, for example, object-oriented code, but then a basis of design understanding of front end. So if you can try to cultivate more of that mindset through practical experience and through just putting them on some courses as well, I think that will benefit the team, because then you sometimes only need one person versus needing two sets of developers. And we've seen that work well at Shell.
Well, thank you very
Cheers,
much.
guys.
And thanks a lot, Ben, for the talk, and some really interesting questions there, and some really interesting discussions. So
Pleasure. Thanks, John.
no worries.